Vecni and Soren continued their journey. After 7 days of travel, they arrived at the entrance to Epona's bog. Inside, they noticed they were in a stinky swamp. Soft, spongy ground consisting mainly of partially decayed plant matter covered the ground. The bog was foul-smelling and dark. Little bits of light shed through the tree branches above. The area was very wet and humid, and much of the ground was heavily saturated in water. Soren commanded Dexter to scout the area. Flying far away in the distance, heading away from the location of the party, Dexter observed an Aarakocra. Dexter continued to search the bog for threats, and saw all sorts of nasty creatures in danger. Crocodiles, giant toads, giant snakes, a mammoth, Forte soldiers, bullywugs, and troglodytes. Soren hoped to find Gragas Stormbringer and Lady Epona traversing the bog, but did not locate them with Dexter. Gragas and Epona left Vigor Valley City days before Soren and Vecni, so Soren wasn't expecting to catch up with them so easily. As Soren and Vecni began their trek into the swamp, Soren revealed to Vecni he was Lord Odoacer's son. Soren spoke of his mother and his conception during an orgy in a vampire's mansion, and of how he met his father for the first time just a week ago, and how he has been trying to digest what he has learned. Vecni spoke of her son, Kevlian. She mentioned that he was here in Dovah, and she explained how she was exiled from Coldbank because of her copulation with Mikkelian, a human. She also spoke of how she felt a strange connection to Roland, who was also a half-elf like Kevlian, during her voyage to Dovah. Soren revealed to Vecni that Vesiesh's father was the Slay Master of War, Dakarth, a drow. Soren and Vecni discussed how all they had at the moment was one another, and they seemed to have grown closer after the recent trials and tribulations they endured. The party continued into the bog, and through a clearing in the trees they observed a Forte banner. A group of Forte soldiers had their backs to Soren and Vecni. They appeared to have a group of prisoners. Harshal, a loud man of Forte with an uneducated drawl, proclaimed the prisoners were guilty of treason and conspiring with usurpers. Vecni and Soren recognized Harshal from Vigor Valley City, as he was one of the Forte leaders near the gallows when Soren spoke with his father. Harshal wore armor with Forte colors. He had uncombed, poofy orange hair, and a patchy and greasy-looking orange beard, and was missing one of his front teeth. The prisoners, which consisted of 3 men and 1 woman, stood on uneven stones. Nooses were tied around their necks, attached to the branches of a nearby tree, and their hands were tied. Harshal kicked one of the rocks out from under a man with a noose tied around his neck. The noose tightened around the man's throat and he began to choke to death. Soren casted mold earth and created a mound of dirt under the hanging man's feet, saving him. Harshal and his men turned and noticed Soren and Vecni behind him. Soren attempted to convince Harshal he was Odoacer's son, using suggestion and even silvery barbs, but failed to do so. Vecni asked Harshal about the prisoners and quickly determined they were innocent common folk being accused of imaginary treasons. After successfully deceiving Harshal about her identity, she claimed her name was Vest Greystone, Vecni bribed Harshal with 8 bottles of liquor and 200 of Soren's gold pieces to free their prisoners. Harshal and his men departed the area, but as he left, Harshal asked Vecni a favor. He explained he was one of Karaganda's 3 lieutenants, along with Thaxos and Rochambeau. Harshal continued, saying Thaxos was elsewhere in the bog. He asked the High Elf pirate to advise Thaxos he and his men left Epona's bog and were en route back to Vigor Valley City. Soren asked Harshal to pass a message to Karaganda the next time he encountered him. Soren asked he tell Karaganda that he, Soren Avicine, intended to take over and lead Forte. Harshal was confused at this request, but agreed to pass the message. Vecni cut down and freed all 4 peasant prisoners: Gerdrin, Briston, Christo, and Mary Kate. Gerdrin, one of the men, thanked Vecni and explained he and his companions were fleeing their homes on the plains to find refuge from the war. Vecni invited the group to join she and Soren. Gerdrin said he heard that through Epona's bog there was a safe, hidden settlement called the Dawghouse, as well as a lizard man village called Ifrai. The man added he would be fine going to either place. While walking through the bog, Mary Kate cried and confided in Vecni she was victimized by the Forte soldiers. Vecni became quite angry upon learning this. Vecni shamed Christo, Mary Kate's husband, for not defending her from the evil soldiers. Christo explained he had heard the men of Forte killed wantonly, and he believed allowing them to take his wife would save their lives. But after they were finished, the soldiers were going to kill Christo's group regardless. Vecni gave Christo a bit of combat training on the fly, so he could better protect Mary Kate in the future. Christo started out the training as a weak coward, but scored a nice sword slash on Vecni's left shoulder before she knocked him unconscious. Briston and Jurgerin picked Christo up and carried the snoozing man as their group continued through the bog. Soren scouted further with Dexter. Dexter observed frogmen, giant crocodiles, giant snakes, a humid area filled with clouds of buzzing insects, and a group of frustrated peasants attempting to dislodge their wagon from being stuck in mud. Soren used mold earth to avoid some of the dangerous obstacles in the bog. He circumvented his way over some impassable sections of rock with solid dirt. Soren and Vecni climbed the rocks and created their own direct route to the struggling peasants. Soren and Vecni climbed down and saw the busy peasants were distracted and did not notice them. A bit further away, the adventurers observed two teenage girls pointing down to the other side of a rocky hill they were standing on. The two girls beckoned to Soren and Vecni. The party first approached the struggling peasants. Vecni used shape water to extract the moisture from the mud under the wagon tires. Soren used mold earth to level out the dried mud under the tires. The wagon was successfully freed from being stuck in mud. The peasants thanked the adventurers for the assistance. As a reward, an older male in the group gave Vecni a half-full jug of ale, which she immediately chugged and emptied. Next, Vecni approached the two teenage girls on the rocky hill and asked what they were looking for. Vecni and Soren recognized the girls as Fivelina and Latius, the two girls of Bloodmist that were at the grand feast in Queensgrace. The girls were suitors of Roland and presented him with a black box containing the finger of Lord Camembert's missing nephew, Tucker. The girls later tried to blackmail Roland into assisting their leader, Lord Craven. Latius explained she was with a larger group, and they spotted treasure chests at the bottom of the rocky hill. She added her companions fell down the hill trying to get to the chests. Latius asked Soren and Vecni to go down and help the rest of her group. Vecni approached the ledge and attempted to grab Latius to throw her down the hill. There was a glint in Latius's eye. She began to grow, and her muscles bulged out of her clothes, tearing them. Her skin turned blue, and she transformed into one of the large blue beasts Vecni faced at the Bloodmist camp with Roland and Vess. A moment later, Fivelina transformed as well. Soren casted Hypnotic Pattern on both creatures, then immediately used both of his portents for the day, warping space and time, forcing Fivelina and Latius to succumb to his spell and become incapacitated. While using his portents, Soren saw an alternate future, one where both creatures resisted his hypnotic pattern and killed he and Vecni. Vecni was also in the area of effect for the hypnotic pattern, but she resisted the effects of the spell. Vecni gave Soren a smug smile and a wink, then slipped behind Latius. Vecni delivered 3 rapid-fire punches to Latius's back, infusing ki into the second strike and stunning the beast with Stunning Strike. Latius glowed with an eerie light, and despite not being able to move, the damage Vecni inflicted on her appeared to slightly heal. Soren casted Mind Sliver on Latius, but she resisted the spell, only taking a small amount of psychic damage. Vecni lashed out at Latius twice with her whip. The first strike missed, but the second one landed, lashing the creature's chest. Vecni again infused ki for a Stunning Strike. Latius resisted the Stunning Strike, but Soren, intending to force Latius to stay stunned, casted Silvery Barbs, which caused Lacius to fail at resisting Vecni's ability. Vecni landed a punch on the stunned creature's back, following the whip strikes. Once again, Lacius glowed and recuperated from some of the damage she received. Soren casted Tasha's Mind Whip on Lacius, causing her head to ring from a sustained psychic attack. Vecni punched Lacius 3 more times in the back, infusing more ki on another successful stunning strike on the second hit. Lacius glowed eerily and recovered a bit of health once again. Soren casted Mind Sliver on Lacius, keeping up the psychic pressure on his wounded opponent. Vecni infused more ki for another stunning strike, hitting Lacius square in the back, then delivered a second blow to the kidneys. Blood poured out of Lacius's mouth and she gasped, trying to catch her breath. Vecni drove her right elbow deep into the beast's back. The creature wobbled and gagged on its own blood, but still stood tall. Lacius's body glowed and she appeared to grow a little healthier, but it was like the equivalent of scooping bucketfuls of water out of a sinking ship. The amount of healing the creature did was minute, compared to the huge amounts of punishing damage it endured. Soren casted Mind Sliver on Lacius again, attacking her psychically and inflicting pain on the stunned beast. Vecni swung her whip overhand, tearing a chunk of meat out of Lacius's back. Then she delivered a backhanded slash, which tore into the exposed flesh, slammed through ribs, and pierced Lacius's heart. The horrendous blue monster collapsed onto the mucky ground. Vecni ripped her whip out of the creature's body, removing Lacius's still beating heart. The beating heart flew past Vecni from the force of her withdrawing her whip.
Soren commanded Dexter to scout the other side of the hill, past where he and Vecni encountered Lacius and Vivalina. Dexter observed shattered wagons and rotting corpses down the steep cliff. Soren then casted Mage Armor to prepare himself for the remainder of this battle, as well as the battles to come in this dangerous bog. Vecni slashed Vivalina with her whip and infused the strike with ki for a stunning strike. Soren casted Silvery Barbs, forcing Fievel to succumb to the ability. The injured creature glowed and appeared to become slightly healthier. Soren nailed Vivalina with Tasha's Mind Whip, further debilitating the stunned beast. Vecni stunned the creature with 2 more whip slashes and a knee to the chest. The Oni glowed and appeared slightly healthier, finally free and able to act, but still under Soren's Mind Whip spell. The Oni casted its own spell. Blue light formed in the creature's hands, and it pushed the magic towards Vecni. Before seeing what Fievel's spell did, Soren casted Counterspell. Soren failed to stop the blue beast's ability, and a ball of cold magic slammed into Vecni's chest. A terrible chill twisted through Vecni's body as she took critical cold damage. Soren casted Tasha's Mind Whip on Vivalina again. Vecni hurled Ignis at the creature, piercing the beast and dealing lightning damage. She followed up, striking the creature again and again, infusing more ki to stun it. Immediately after, Vivalina glowed and appeared to recover from some of the damage. Soren affected the creature with another Tasha's Mind Whip spell. Vecni delivered another combination of attacks to Vivalina, but when it was all said and done, the monstrous creature still stood, able to fight. Vivalina threw a glaive at Vecni, but missed. The creature wanted to continue attacking, but Tasha's Mind Whip kept it debilitated and unable to do more things. Soren held up his wand and said, "Get fucked!" Soren's voice radiated in the beast's head, tearing through its mind and destroying each and every nerve ending. Vivalina fell dead into the muck of Epona's bog. Soren and Vecni searched both deceased creatures and found a potion of healing on each of them, as well as a total of 500 gold. Susie, a little girl with a group of peasants, commented on how Epona's bog was a dangerous place after witnessing Vivalina and Lacius transform into monstrous blue beasts and attempting to kill Vecni and Soren. Vecni asked Susie's papa, the same man that rewarded her with alcohol a short time earlier for helping with the wagon, to stay close by while she and Soren rested. Gurdren, Briston, Christo, and Mary Kate relaxed with the group as well, while Vecni slumped down against the wagon and began to doze off. Soren ritual casted alarm and took watch. A short while into Vecni's rest, Soren's alarm activated, and he detected creatures coming through the area of his spell. Soren alerted his companions that something was coming. He turned back in the direction of the threat and observed 5 large snakes and 2 crocodiles heading towards them. Soren launched a fireball at the approaching creatures with his last remaining spell slot. A blazing inferno torched the beasts, killing the snakes and harming the 2 crocs. One of the crocodiles rapidly swam towards Susie and opened its mouth wide. The beast clamped its powerful jaws over the girl and ripped her head off. Blood pumped out of the large wound and she collapsed to the mucky ground. Soren casted Mind Sliver on the crocodile that murdered poor Susie. The wounded creature could not survive the psychic attack, and its small brain exploded inside its skull. The other crocodile opened its mouth wide and bit down hard on a male peasant. The beast pulled and savaged on the man until his head and neck tore away from the man's body, spraying fountains of blood into the thick muck. Soren's Mind Sliver cantrip dispatched the last crocodile. Due to Soren's quick thinking, and some tanking by little Susie, Vecni was able to complete her short rest. Soren began a long rest, while Vecni kept watch alongside Susie's father, Christo, Briston, Gurdren, Mary Kate, and some peasants that the adventurers were not yet acquainted with. A few hours into the rest, Vecni observed a group of frog people approaching their position, with weapons drawn. Vecni fired a Kensai shot arrow at one of the advancing beasts, piercing its eye and exploding the creature's brain out the back of its head. Vecni yelled over to Soren, advising him they were under attack. Soren woke up as the creatures advanced on him. For some reason, Soren was sleeping in front of the group, in an extremely vulnerable position. The frogmen hacked away at a trio of peasants in the front, slaughtering all 3 of them. One of the frogmen struck Soren before he was able to stand after waking as well. Vecni leaped behind the frogmen and lashed at the one that attacked Soren with her whip. Her whip wrapped around the beast's neck. The metal barbs of her weapon stuck into its throat. Vecni yanked hard on the handle, tearing out the frogman's jugular. Vecni turned to another frogman and lashed her whip at this foe as well. She dispatched the second creature in the same exact manner, ripping the jugular behind the soft, amphibious throat of her opponent. Vecni turned towards the third frogman and reeled back for a haymaker punch. She pushed her fist forward and plunged, knuckle deep, piercing through the beast's torso, killing it instantly. The frogmen stabbed at some of the peasants with their spears, causing some injuries, but failing to kill any of the defenseless non-combatants. Vecni quickly lashed out with her whip, slashing open one of the frogmen's stomachs. Entrails and blood spilled out of the wound, and the creature perished slowly and painfully. Vecni slashed deeply into the chest of another frogman. While it was reeling over, she uppercutted through the chest wound and into its head, killing the beast. The remaining frogmen kept up their attack, stabbing at members of Soren and Vecni's group with spears and biting at them. 2 more peasants fell dead, and Soren suffered damage as well. Vecni's whip lashed out and penetrated one of the creature's mouths. The metal barbs sunk in and stuck to the beast's gums. Vecni yanked on her whip, tearing the barbs through the frogman's cheek with great force, whipping his head around with a sickening, ripping sound. The creature fell dead to the ground with a broken neck. Vecni expertly twirled her whip and snapped it out towards the head of a yellow frogman. The whip barbs latched onto the creature's left eyeball, and Vecni deftly yanked the eye from the beast's socket. The creature dropped dead, like the others. Vecni ran to the back of a red frogman and sunk her fist deep into its torso. She yanked her hand out and found it to be covered in thick viscera. The creature toppled over, dead. Soren nailed one of the frogmen with Mind Sliver, causing psychic damage and affecting its ability to fight. 3 of the frogmen attacked Vecni, 2 of which pincered her and had the female pirate flanked. One of them stabbed her with its spear. Vecni whipped one of the frogmen twice. The second whip slash caught onto the beast's tongue and ripped it out of the creature's mouth. The frogman fell dead. Vecni punched the frogman Soren Mind Slivered in the stomach. The beast collapsed to the ground and perished from its injuries. Soren attacked the last remaining frogman with his Mind Sliver spell, dealing considerable psychic damage. He rushed to the reeling beast's side and stabbed at it with his dagger, while he and Vecni had the creature flanked. Soren missed, however, and the beast turned towards Soren and attacked with its spear. The frogman attacked twice, but missed the human wizard with both. Vecni lashed at the frogman with her whip, peeling the skin off its face, which was a painful, fatal blow. After the battle, Soren introduced himself to the remaining peasants, which were comprised of 1 male, Herman, and 2 females. Vecni searched the bodies of the deceased peasants, which seemed to bother the sensibilities of the peasants that remained. Vecni recovered 30 gold and a potion of climbing amongst the corpses. One of the females, a young girl, petted Dexter's head and thanked Soren for saving her from the beasts of the bog. Soren advised the young girl that he and Vecni were devoted to protecting the innocent. Vecni and Soren learned the 3 peasants were comprised of a father, Herman, the man's wife, Mabel, and a daughter, all of which delved into the bog to escape the war between Vigor and their enemies. Vecni gave Herman the 30 gold she acquired from his deceased companions. He told Vecni she should keep it, but Vecni declined, stating she had enough gold already. Vecni and Herman spoke a bit about the state of the kingdom, Forte, and Epona's bog. The man told Vecni his wagon was pulled by donkeys, but alligators tore them apart a short distance from their present location. Herman stated several of his family members had perished in the bog already, and they had only traveled a short distance through it. He explained he and his family planned to settle in either Ifrai or the Dawghouse for safety from the war. Herman added he did not know specifically where to find either place. He continued he heard the Dawghouse was a safe place of peace, ran by a former hermit called the Medicine Man. Herman speculated the lizardfolk might prefer the bog to be dangerous, as it made it difficult for outsiders to find their village. He added he had not seen a single lizard man since arriving in the bog. Vecni advised Herman to bring his family to Queensgrace for safety instead. Herman and his family kept watch while Soren and Vecni rested. Vecni butchered a crocodile for meat while Soren casted alarm prior to the duo resting. Upon awakening, Soren scouted the area with Dexter. Soren identified One Reaper's polearm and learned how it worked and what it could do. Herman and his family prepared to part ways with Vecni and Soren. Soren warned the man about Blood Mist, while Vecni advised him how to handle passing Lady Rose's riddles in White Fawn Forest. Vecni confided in Soren she did not believe Herman and his family would survive the journey to reach Queen Inez and her people. Vecni and Soren delved deeper into the bog, with Dexter on Soren's shoulder so he could see in the dark. As Dexter scouted, he located a man-made hallway leading to a stone door inside a rock wall surrounded by trees. In front of the door was a closed chest. This hallway and door and chest were all surrounded by a small, murky pond. Vecni and Soren returned to Herman, who was struggling to start a fire. She asked if he had any alcohol, and he provided her with a half bottle of bourbon and a mostly empty cask of ale. Soren, Vecni, Herman, and Mabel finished off the cask of ale. Then, Soren drank his last remaining potion of dark vision. Soren and Vecni resumed their journey through the mucky swamp. Soren casted invisibility on himself and Vecni, hoping to avoid some of the dangerous creatures Dexter had alerted him to. Vecni stepped through the muck, and her entire body sank through the wet ground. She submerged into mud and water and struggled to take in air. Vecni casted Shape Water to move water away from her face so she could breathe. Vecni attempted to swim upwards and out of the muck but failed to do so. Soren casted Mold Earth and removed the dirt from the muddy water, allowing the adventurers to see clearly into the cavity. Vecni sank and became completely submerged in the water, very slowly beginning to drown. Seeing the water cavity was approximately 10 feet deep, Vecni casted Shape Water and created a 5-foot cube of ice beneath her feet so that she could stand on it. Soren reached down and pulled Vecni from the water. Then he casted Mold Earth and removed all the dirt from her clothing. Vecni dried herself off with Shape Water, extracting all the moisture from her garments. The duo continued on, realizing the sinking muck hazard might be commonplace in the bog. Soren and Vecni decided to alternate, using Mold Earth and Shape Water to make the ground in front of them completely solid for every 5 feet they traveled. Due to both adventurers casting multiple cantrips when dealing with the muck, they both lost their invisibility effect. Vecni and Soren approached an opening near mucky water. Vecni used Shape Water to create a makeshift ice bridge so the two could cross. As the two crossed the pond-like area, Dexter heard croaking coming from underneath the water. The croaking sounded like it originated from multiple large-sized amphibians. Vecni continued across the pond with ice bridges. She drew her whip and thumbed the hilt of her sword as she neared closer to the origin of the croaking sounds. As a distraction, Soren casted Dancing Lights and moved the bright light over past the pond, in between a group of trees on land up ahead. Immediately afterwards, the adventurers heard a skittering sound coming from that area. Soren directed his Dancing Lights over to a rock wall and had it stop there, causing a lot of movement and audible skittering near the trees. A giant green amphibian frog head ascended from the water, and the eyes peered at the adventurers, then submerged back beneath the mucky water. While being extremely careful and meticulous, Vecni continued to create small ridges of ice so she and Soren could cross the pond, without appearing aggressive or threatening to any creatures that might be under the water. Upon reaching land, the adventurers noticed fine webbing upon the trees. While moving around the area, Soren casted Mold Earth on a patch of land that would have been another sinking muck hazard had someone stepped on it. Webbing shot out from behind Soren and just barely missed him. A giant spider ran up behind Soren and tried to bite him, but missed. 3 separate spiders fired webbing at Soren and Vecni. 2 of the webs missed, but one hurtled directly at Vecni. She used her Deflect Missile's ability to knock the webbing out of the air, where it fell harmlessly to the mucky ground. As the battle continued, the adventurers found that areas of the muddy ground were covered in webbing and were difficult to walk through. Vecni ripped chunks of flesh from one of the giant spiders with 2 whip strikes. She infused ki into one of her whip strikes, stunning the beast. Vecni stomped down on one of the creature's legs, breaking it. Soren casted Fireball over the area of their battle, and the pond near the stone door. Trees in the radius caught aflame, and the thick webbing all around the battlefield melted. Soren's spell killed a snake in the pond, and badly burned 3 giant spiders. Soren pulled out a dagger, and attempted to stab the spider Vecni had attacked, but he slipped and fell in the muck. An agitated swarm of snakes ascended from the pond and slithered through the muck towards Vecni. The 2 giant spiders concealing themselves in trees were singed by the fires and were forced to drop from their locations. The beasts moved away from the fires towards a clearing, revealing themselves. Both spiders fired webs at Soren, but neither struck him. Another spider moved to Soren's side and opened its mouth to chomp down on the young wizard. Thinking quickly, Soren casted Shield, and the creature's teeth clacked hard onto the magical barrier, leaving Soren unharmed. Vecni pulled out a stick of dynamite and lit the wick with fire from a burning tree. She threw the dynamite behind the swarm of snakes, which exploded and damaged the creatures. Vecni stomped on the injured snakes, but found doing so was not especially effective. Vecni attempted to infuse ki for a stunning strike, but found the swarm could not be affected by that ability. Soren plunged his dagger into the top of the stunned spider's head, then ripped downwards, tearing through the beast's eyes and splitting its face in half. The giant spider collapsed dead in the muck. Soren casted Hypnotic Pattern in an area containing the swarm of snakes, 2 giant spiders, and Vecni Avumque. The swarm of snakes were immune to the effects of the spell. Soren used his portent to force both spiders to become temporarily incapacitated by his spell. Lastly, Vecni failed to resist the Hypnotic Pattern and became incapacitated as well. The pile of snakes swarmed around Vecni's body, wrapping around and biting her. The only giant spider that was not currently stunned approached Soren from behind. Soren turned to face it. The spider bit Soren's arm, injecting poison into his bloodstream. Vecni slipped out of the snake swarm and hurled Ignis at the spider that attacked Soren. Lightning streaked across the battlefield, electrocuting the pile of snakes to death and slamming into the spider. An explosion of electricity rocked the spider, and it fell to the ground, smoking and dead. Soren casted Mind Sliver on one of the incapacitated spiders, hurting its mind and breaking it free from the Hypnotic Pattern. Soren slashed the beast with his dagger after he finished casting his spell. The spider, now able to fight, bit Vecni's leg and flooded her bloodstream with poison. Vecni maneuvered over to the spider, slashing it twice with her sword. She attempted to slash it a third time, but overexerted herself, and the physics of what her weapon could handle. Vecni shattered yet another sword, this time on the hard carapace of the giant spider before her. Soren casted Mind Sliver on the giant spider, which affected the beast and damaged its mind. The wounded spider bit Vecni again, this time latching onto her left hip. The creature did not inject any poison into the High Elf pirate, however. Vecni lashed out at the giant spider, dragging her whip across the creature's thorax. The barbs of her whip tore open the beast's body, and innards spilled onto the mucky ground, before the creature collapsed and ceased to breathe. Vecni fired a Kensai's shot arrow at the last remaining injured and incapacitated giant spider. The arrow plunged into the beast's skull, killing it. Walking past the burning trees, the adventurers continued towards the pond and the stone door in the rock wall. Vecni made small ice bridges and crossed the pond over to the landing near the entrance to the small hallway leading to the stone door. On the small landing, the adventurers observed a small stone chest. Soren cast Identify in the chest and found it was not magical. Vecni examined the hallway and door. She found the hallway was 15 feet deep. She determined the hallway was expertly excavated from the rock wall. Vecni observed a painting above the stone door. The painting was of a strange green leaf, similar to the leaf on a sigil that the adventurers saw in Lorgan's tavern. To the left of the door was 2 large rectangular indents, and 2 additional rectangular indents to the right of the door. Inside the stone chest, Soren found a multitude of rectangular stone tablets with art chiseled into them. There were 20 total tablets inside. Soren immediately recognized this as some kind of a puzzle. Soren first thought the tablet with a rose on it might be relevant to the puzzle, as the white rose was the sigil of Ferelden, and King Dokkan Swiftwater was known to frequent Epona's bog. Vecni placed an angry lizard tablet, closed-eyed snake tablet, smoking spear tablet, and a crying cat tablet into the indents around the door, but nothing happened. Soren carefully considered the meaning behind each tablet. His thoughts were as follows. The angry lizard represented the lizardfolk of Frank. The rose represented blues. The crying cat represented lions. The smoking spearhead represented Forte. The close-eyed snake represented Chaos. The burning tower represented Slay. The skeleton wearing a crown represented Furia. The smiling dog sigil represented a faction Soren was not familiar with. Vecni inserted the tablets representing Frank, Lions, Slay, and the smiling dog tablet, but nothing happened once again. An idea occurred to Soren. He placed all 4 smiling dog tablets into the rectangular indents. Soren heard mechanisms and gears shifting and moving, followed by a loud rumbling. The stone door swung open. The adventurers entered the hidden settlement they had found, the Dawghouse, a collection of wooden buildings built inside a cave. The Dawghouse had wooden signs with many slogans, advocating peace, smoking, joking, cheering, and beer. The architecture was wooden, and the setup in the settlement appeared to be random and without rhyme or reason. Soren and Vecni entered the medicine man's quarters and met the leader of the Dawghouse. The medicine man was an older human covered in comically long white hair coming from his nose and ears. He had a long white beard but a bald head. He wore green pajamas and puffed on some kind of pipe. A pungent, skunky smell came from green smoke that emanated from his pipe. The entire room was full of this smoke. The medicine man's quarters was the largest building in the Dawghouse, and the walls of the main room were lined with many, many books. The medicine man introduced himself with a "Sup," and greeted the adventurers with cheer and beer. The medicine man rolled some kind of green vegetation into a blunt and handed it to Vecni. Vecni was unfamiliar with the substance, but as an experienced cigar smoker, Vecni smoked it just as she would a cigar. Vecni did not inhale any of the smoke while puffing on the blunt. Vecni felt a burning in the back of her throat and coughed a bit. Medicine Man prepared another blunt, lit it, and handed it to Soren. The medicine man told Soren he looked like a cool dude and implored him to smoke and joke. Soren told a joke about not trusting stairs, then smoked the blunt. Soren took heavy tokes of the lit vegetation and was greatly affected by the drug. Soren became very giggly and dopey with a perpetual smile on his face. He felt a bit sleepy and experienced some cottonmouth, as well as a hunger for something sweet. Medicine Man, Vecni, and Soren joked around, drank some extremely hoppy ale, and spoke a bit further. Medicine Man advised the group he assumed Soren came to the Dawghouse to see King Doken, due to Soren's attire and the ring that he wore. Medicine Man added that Doken was his best bud. Vecni asked about Captain Rattleack, and the Medicine Man stated the Minotaur captain of the Misfit Bastards left the Dawghouse a short time ago. Soren revealed Doken was his stepdad, and he didn't want the king to find out he smoked the herbs. He began exhibiting paranoia and strange behavior. Soren casted Dispel Magic on himself, and found he was not under the effect of a spell. Soren asked to take the interesting looking books lining the walls, and his gracious host permitted the young wizard to borrow them as long as he returned them. Soren told more jokes about dentistry and masturbation, getting along really well with the leader of the Dawghouse. The adventurers left the medicine man's quarters and entered Cannabis Cafe and Inn. Inside, they met the barista, a half-elf named Autumn. They observed a group of 4 playing cards at a table. These 4 consisted of the half-elf bard, King Doken Swiftwater of Ferelden; Gragas Stormbringer, the dwarven cleric and member of the Order of the Burning Fist that Soren and Vecni dispatched to return Lady Epona to Chieftain Snorian of Ifrai; Pureblood, a fierce Black Orc warrior and member of Dogs. Lastly, Melvin, a human wizard from Ferelden. Melvin was familiar to Soren and around the same age. Standing guard behind King Doken was Uldrum Brownfinger, a dirty-looking, smelly, armored dwarf. A half-dozen dwarves and human guards, donning the white rose sigil of Ferelden on their armor, stood with him. Also inside the bar was Pink Mango, a human. She was demure, olive-skinned, with wide hips, a curvy bosom, and thick, luscious lips. This beauty wore pink armor and a pink veil. Vecni and Soren recognized her from Lorgan's Tavern. The ebony human knight from Queensgrace and Lorgan's Tavern was present as well. He was pacing back and forth in the tavern. The last individual in this establishment was Fenris, a middle-aged human male in a brown cloak. He was the other dog's member the adventurers saw in Lorgan's Tavern. Vecni spoke with Autumn and paid for a room. Autumn provided the pirate with a new stack of wanted posters. Soren ordered an algae brew beer and began to partake in the free bar nuts. The young wizard grabbed handfuls of nuts and legumes, spilling many of them all over himself, and shoved as many into his mouth as he possibly could. Vecni and Soren spoke with Gragas. He admitted he was doing as the two asked, escorting Lady Epona to Ifrai, when he and the female lizardfolk were attacked by harpies and bugbears while ascending Comet Mountain. Gragas explained he fell and twisted his ankle during these tribulations, which gave the bugbears an opportunity to kidnap Epona. He added that he hobbled his dwarven tuchus to the doghouse to rest and recuperate from his injury. Gragas told Vecni and Soren he believed the bugbears had some kind of a camp near Comet Mountain where they may have taken Epona. Vecni was unhappy with Gragas upon hearing this, and she fretted over what malady might befall Mictlean and Edgerin during their journey to Queensgrace. An extremely high Soren waved his wand in the air in an unbalanced, exaggerated fashion, while ritual casting his unseen servant spell. King Doken Swiftwater, who was a half-elf wearing a silk blue tunic and cape, noticed his stepson Soren. Doken was adorned lavishly, with a golden crown, gem-studded rings on each finger, and fine black boots. Doken greeted the young wizard and mentioned that he lost his favorite loot in a game of cards to the Black Orc at the table. Soren asked Pureblood, the Black Orc, to return the loot and cast his suggestion. Pureblood was affected by the spell and handed the loot back to the Ferelden king. Doken thanked Soren and the two spoke for a bit. Doken stated he came to the doghouse to hang out with his good friend, the Medicine Man, and to meet with Radalak, captain of the Misfit Bastards. Doken explained Radalak was en route to the Cutthroat Docks to purchase a new ship and replace lost crewmates. Soren implored Doken not to tell the Queen he was doing drugs. Vecni watched King Doken and Soren interact from the bar. She observed Soren did not appear particularly respectful or reverent of his half-elf companion. It appeared the half-elf, while dressed lavishly with fine garments and jewelry, possessed the demeanor and speech patterns of a young boy. Soren asked Doken how his mother, the Queen of Ferelden, Genlia Avicine Swiftwater, fared. Doken replied stating Queen Genlia was a sweet woman, but always nagged him to bring the young human wizard, Melvin, along with him whenever he left Ferelden. Soren recalled Melvin was a young mage, often present in the royal court, and that Queen Genlia seemed to have a particular liking for this human. Soren and Melvin spoke for a time about magic and arcane knowledge. Melvin explained he had made progress in illusion magic. He challenged Soren to a contest. Melvin suggested they both conjure an image for the king, and whichever image was best would dictate which of them was the greatest wizard of Ferelden. Soren asked Melvin if they could compete in the morning instead. Melvin scoffed and admonished Soren for not being ready at all times to prove his magical prowess. Soren, misliking Melvin's words, used his station as Prince of Ferelden, honorary lord and master of spells, to humiliate Melvin and ordered him to fetch Soren a drink. Doken asked Soren where his sister Vess was, and Soren answered he believed she was in Queensgrace. Soren asked Doken if he knew where Marigold Mandred was. Doken replied he would take Soren to Marigold. He explained she secreted herself deep in the bog, just like her aunt, Ethel Greentooth did in the fetid garden of Thaddeus. Vecni sauntered over to where Soren and King Dokkan were speaking. Soren introduced the two. Vecni immediately accosted the king for ordering the assassination of Captain Mundo and the mutiny aboard the Bastard Sire. Dokkan looked nervous and denied having anything to do with either thing. Vecni confided in Dokkan that she defeated the misfit bastards on the seas, leaving them without a ship. Vecni asked to play blackjack with King Dokkan and the Black Orc, Pureblood. Dokkan admitted he was out of gold, and remarked that no matter how much he taxed his people, the gold always seemed to fly right out of the Ferelden coffers. Soren wished to be dealt in as well, so Soren, Vecni, and Pureblood played blackjack, with Pureblood acting as dealer. Soren and Vecni played several hands of blackjack against Pureblood, winning most of them. Soren asked Pureblood a bit about himself. Pureblood said he currently served the Medicine Man and dogs, but his clan of Black Orcs hailed from an island to the northeast of Thaddeus. Pureblood explained his clan was enslaved by a dragon, and about a quarter century ago, a group of warriors, including King Dokkan, came to the island and slayed the dragon, freeing Pureblood's people from their bondage. Soren and Vecni realized this group was the Order of the Burning Fist. Dokkan regaled Vecni with tales of her son, Kevlian Greystone, and the adventures the two had as members of the Burning Fist. She was very impressed with the tales she heard of her boy. After briefly discussing sleeping arrangements, Dokkan revealed that he spent most nights at the Dawghouse sharing a room with Pink Mango, the demure, darker-skinned woman with pink armor and a busty build. Soren misliked hearing this and told the king that he would be sleeping in Soren's room tonight. King Dokkan Swiftwater, Lord Soren Avicine, and Melvin shared a room upstairs in the Cannabis Cafe and Inn. After a few more hours of drinking, Vecni went up to the door of Soren and King Dokkan's room. Uldrum Brownfinger rudely advised Vecni she was not permitted to enter. Vecni attempted to push Uldrum away from the door so she could open it. Vecni banged on the door, calling to Soren. Uldrum and his men drew their arms and attacked Vecni. Uldrum swung at her with a dagger, while the guards used swords. Vecni easily dodged their attacks with her patient defense, barely moving while standing in front of the door. A groggy Soren opened the door and yelled at the group in front of his room, clearly agitated that he was awakened. He ordered Uldrum and his men to stay their blades, and added Vecni was permitted to go wherever she pleased. Vecni and Uldrum bickered for a bit, and Soren chastised Uldrum for disrespecting his friend. Vecni went to sleep in the room with Soren, King Dokkan, and Melvin. Before laying down for the night, Vecni noticed Dokkan was cozily snuggled up with a pillow and blanket, sleeping soundly. The half-elf did not appear to have a care in the world. After awakening, Vecni and Soren went downstairs, where they observed King Dokkan, Gragas, Melvin, Uldrum, and Pink Mango sitting together at a table. Vecni pulled up a chair and joined them. Soren and Melvin discussed the terms of their illusion contest. Melvin asked Soren to wager his title as the Ferelden Master of Spells. Melvin offered a spell scroll in return. The scroll was Finger of Death, a spell he learned from King Dokkan's friend, Odoacer, who once knew no magic at all, but after sacrificing many elven lives to his god, was bequeathed with powerful magics. Melvin said he trained with Odoacer when he visited the Ferelden court some time ago. Soren declined, stating that to wager his title, Melvin must offer either 1 million gold or a scroll of wish. Melvin admitted he could not wager either. Soren attempted to convince Melvin to wager his spellbook against Soren's abyssal spellbook, but failed to persuade the young mage, so the contest of illusion magic did not take place. As Vecni and Soren left the Cannabis Cafe and Inn to go shopping, Vecni showed animosity and disdain for Uldrum. Soren recalled that night 10 years ago. The night he and Vesiesh brought down the kingdom of Kazkaroom. He remembered that Uldrum played a pivotal role in his sister's success. On the orders of King Dokkan, Queen Genlia, and Sir Duncan, Soren, Vesiesh, Dekarth, Zombina, and Uldrum burned the castle, murdered the royal family, stole the Eye of Zulbilt, and conjured duplicates of dead and missing Burning Fist members. Of course, Soren was just a young boy when this transpired. He fell asleep pretty early in the night, and Vest told him most of what happened afterwards. Soren and Vecni arrived at the deluxe shop and smithy, where they met the store owner, Norsk Berserker. Norsk was a middle-aged, balding human, chewing on a leafy substance that appeared to partially stain his teeth green. The duo looked over Norsk's wares for a time. After a bit of haggling, Vecni sold one Reaper's polearm to Norsk for 850 gold. Soren paid 600 gold for 2 potions of blur. Vecni flirted a bit with Norsk and asked if she could get some kind of discount. Norsk offered her a 25% discount on any one item if Vecni agreed to go on a date with him. She gave him a kiss on the cheek and haggled for 35% off at the cost of a date. Soren purchased a wand of fireball from Norsk for 6,525 gold. Vecni used her 35% discount to purchase a Tome of Understanding for 17,875 gold. Vecni purchased an amulet of natural armor for 6,000 gold. Soren purchased 2 scrolls of silence for a total of 400 gold. Next, the adventurers made a stop at the Dawghouse jail, but found it empty. Soren searched the small building and found a healing potion inside a desk. Vecni felt the urge to tinkle, so she made a stop at the outhouse. Inside, she located a circular metal door in the floor of the small building. She lifted it and uncovered some kind of a man-made gravel tunnel. Vecni and Soren traveled down the tunnel for a full day, finding a ladder at the end. The ladder led to a concealed entryway back to the plains in close proximity to the burnt husk of Serv's Tavern. Vecni noted the shortcut on the map the group received from Merciless. Then she and Soren took the tunnel back to the Dawghouse. Vecni stopped by the deluxe shop and smithy, where she apologized to Norsk Berserker for missing their date. Vecni and Norsk went back to his modest home. They shared a meal consisting of pheasant, green onions, and a side of mixed vegetables. Vecni pulled out the bottle of rum she still had left over and shared it with the man. The pair held hands and enjoyed the pleasant evening. Afterwards, the pair visited the Cannabis Cafe and Inn. Soren, King Dokkan, Uldrum, Pink Mango, Gragas, and some others were inside. Soren suspected his stepfather had some kind of inappropriate relationship with the busty woman in pink armor. He questioned King Dokkan about his relationship with Pinky. Dokkan assured Soren he had done nothing with Pink Mango that would disrespect the queen and betray her trust. Dokkan advised Vecni and Soren he would bring them to Marigold now. Soren asked Gragas to come with them, but he said his ankle still hurt. Dokkan strummed his lute for a few moments, and a blue portal appeared out of thin air. Vecni and Soren stepped through the portal and entered into what looked like Epona's bog. There was nothing around them, aside from the swamp and a path straight ahead. The portal closed, and Dokkan was nowhere to be seen.
Dexter scouted the path ahead, which appeared to be somewhere deep in Epona's bog. This area was strange, as the sound of wildlife was not present. There was only the bubbling sound of the muck. Dexter came to a section with a small stream leading to a pond. He observed a black circular shadow inside the pond, which appeared to be quite large and took up nearly the entire body of water. Dexter observed humanoid creatures with claws, forked tongues, and greenish-blue skin lying in wait throughout this area, hiding behind trees. These monsters looked sickly, possibly rotting. They wore clothing, but the garments were old, mottled, and decayed. All of these creatures were fairly still and looking in the same direction. in the direction of Soren and Vecni. Vecni speculated King Dokkan may have led the pair into a trap of sorts. Soren casted mage armor, preparing himself for a possible fight. Vecni drew her bow and notched an arrow. Soren and Vecni carefully advanced towards the area that Dexter scouted out. Dexter took a closer look at the shadowy object inside the pond. The owl observed a huge frog-like creature with multiple tentacles and a stalk of eyeballs. Soren casted dancing lights and twirled the 4 separate light sources about the area like fireflies, illuminating the entire battlefield at separate different moments. The humanoid creatures did not react to this in any way, keeping completely still even when illuminated. Vecni observed the lack of reaction from these beasts, and she speculated they might be bewitched by Marigold, as she was known to be a powerful magic user. Soren upcasted invisibility on himself and Vecni, planning to slip by the creatures without a fight. Soren and Vecni carefully snuck through the wet, mucky swamp, doing their best to avoid the creatures. Dexter perched himself on Soren's shoulder, and the young wizard saw through the familiar's eyes so he could quietly navigate the wet bog in the dark. Vecni progressed through the area gracefully and with skill, finding solid footholds and moving about in an efficient manner. Soren held onto her and followed Vecni's every step. As the pair made it further into the dangerous area, they heard a startling loud female voice echo through the swamp, breaking the eerie silence. The voice said,
"Silly goose."
The behavior of the silent and still, ghoulish creatures changed. The beasts became animated. They sniffed at the air, grunted and growled, and began to move about the area wildly, almost ravenously. Vecni and Soren continued through the swamp. Vecni's foot sunk deep into a particularly deep section of muck. Her step made a loud, sucking noise. Some of the ghouls became alerted to the elven pirate's presence. 3 of the beasts closed in on and attacked Vecni. They could not see her, but snapped at the air with sharp teeth and lunged at nothingness with their claws. The creatures were unable to connect with the pirate captain. Vecni disengaged and moved away from the beasts, hoping they would not be able to follow her steps. The creatures turned towards Vecni's direction and growled. Soren disengaged as well and moved away from those that hunted his ally, slipping into the pond. The creatures attacked Vecni again, but failed to hurt the agile female high elf. Vecni disengaged again and continued to flee. This time the beasts lost track of her though. Vecni and Soren were now separated, but the duo continued to make their way through the ghoul-filled swamp. Vecni noticed that ever since she heard that girl's voice, the ghouls had been acting alert and frantic, like they knew that prey was nearby. Vecni approached a clearing through the trees and observed a horde of the creatures ahead. From both sides of the thick trees, she heard rustling and growling, as though more of the creatures were arriving at their location. The 2 adventurers were absolutely, positively surrounded. Vecni concentrated and used her senses to locate Soren. She reunited with the young wizard in the midst of the growling, murderous creatures. Soren moved his dancing lights amongst the tree line, and everywhere the light touched, he observed more and more of the ghouls stumbling through the wood towards them, sniffing and snapping at the air. Something seemed to be drawing the beasts to Soren and Vecni. An eye stalk emerged from the pond and looked around the area. Soren and Vecni were keenly aware the eye belonged to a humongous amphibian that was beneath the water. Vecni examined the branches and vines that were suspended high over the clearing ahead of her, and surmised they did not appear to be naturally occurring flora. Soren continued to push forward, sneaking through the horde of zombies. Vecni became quite concerned, considering the quantity and density of the ghouls in their vicinity, but she warily followed her companion into possibly becoming surrounded by their deadly foes. Soren slickly passed by one of the creatures and a cluster of its friends without being noticed at all. It began to seem as though the adventurers would coolly pass by this horde completely unscathed. Vecni looked on with worry, as her young friend was completely surrounded by creatures, and they were tightly packed in on all sides. Soren walked a bit further through the horde and just barely made enough noise to alert the ghouls. The creatures absolutely dogpiled Soren. They slammed into him from every angle, and while they could not see him, the commotion caught the attention of others, who also rushed over to attack. The ravenous, drooling creatures slashed and bit Soren, badly hurting and paralyzing him. Vecni observed the ghouls dogpiling an area ahead. She cursed Soren for ignoring her warnings. The pirate captain called out to the witch that she believed controlled these beasts. "Marigold, call off your ghouls!" Vecni fired 2 arrows at one of the ghouls, badly hurting it and dropping her invisibility. Ghouls swarmed towards Vecni, and those surrounding Soren attacked again. Soren broke from his paralysis and was able to cast the shield spell, just as 4 ghouls attempted to tear at him with their sharp teeth. The bites missed, with one set of the sharp teeth clanging off Soren's magic barrier. 4 more ghouls slashed at Soren with razor-sharp claws. Only one of the creatures was able to slip past the wizard's barrier with its attack. But the single slash was enough to bring down the wounded mage. Soren fell to the mucky ground of Epona's bog. Vecni called out again. "Marigold, the son of King Doken is down!" Vecni fired 2 arrows at an advancing ghoul, striking it in the gut with both, then took a defensive stance after repositioning. Vecni heard a woman's voice echo through the swamp, rhyming strange words in common.
Snake skin and curdled milk, a halfling's eye and Dovan silk.
There was a sudden change in the horde of ghouls devouring Soren. The creatures were in the process of ravenously pouncing on his body to consume him, but their bodies, suddenly and seemingly against the creatures' wills, convulsed and lifted their heads from Soren's fallen form. In unison, each and every ghoul's gaze snapped towards Vecni. The ghouls swarmed towards the high elf pirate, but struggled to keep up with her impressive speed. While fleeing, Vecni turned and fired an arrow at the ghoul with 2 arrows in its stomach. This arrow pierced the beast's brain, killing it. The ghouls, very suspiciously, began fighting as one, with some trying to head Vecni off, while others came from behind. It appeared as though the creatures were pieces on a chessboard, moving strategically to pincer and trap the high elf pirate. Vecni used Step of the Wind and dodged in between the ghouls to double back towards the downed Soren, who was no longer surrounded. The ghouls dashed back towards Vecni, fanning out in a formation which seemed like a strangely intelligent maneuver for creatures such as these. Vecni reached Soren's body and stood over it. She drew Ignis and hurled it towards the horde of monsters. The javelin zipped through the beasts and slammed into the chest of one of the ghouls in the back row. The tip of Ignis pierced the creature and electricity burst from its chest, frying its entire body and leaving the monster a lifeless smoking husk. Ghouls in the wake of Ignis's path were shot with lightning power and took considerable damage as well. Vecni ran back through the ghouls again, leaping into the air and delivering a jumping knee to the chin of one of the beasts. The creature's neck broke and it died, as Vecni continued on her way past it with her Step of the Wind ability. The ghouls continued to behave intelligently, this time managing to surround Vecni as she fled. Vecni lit and threw 3 of her dynamite sticks at the thickest mass of ghouls. 5 already injured ghouls were vaporized by the blasts, while others suffered significant damage from the explosions. Having cleared a small path through the creatures, Vecni channeled more of her ki and used Step of the Wind to flee a good distance away from the monsters. As she moved past a couple of the ghouls, they slashed out at her with their claws, and one of them connected, slashing her right cheek and drawing blood. Soren's eyes shot open and he gasped, inhaling foul air, awakening in the mud of Epona's bog. That woman's voice echoed through the battlefield. "Tee, I'm not going to kill you, silly gooses." Immediately following these words, all the feral, bloodthirsty creatures stopped, and whichever pose they were in, their movement seemingly frozen. The eyes of the ghouls still moved, however, following Vecni and Soren, staring hungrily at their prey with violent, deadly intent. The creatures were now statues, the only movement coming from their eyes. Vecni ran over to Soren and did a baseball slide towards her friend, immediately checking on his well-being. Soren said he was fine, but he was covered in wounds and spitting up blood. He casted mold earth to clean off his dirty, mud-soaked garments. Vecni breathed heavily, her chest heaving after expending so much of her ki to survive the battle. After a brief rest in a mud hut Soren created with his magic, the pair continued down the path. After an hour or so of travel, they came upon a mansion with pillars and vines ahead of the front door. Next to the mansion was a small wooden shack. Soren sent his unseen servant to knock on the front door of the mansion. The vines ceded away from the door, and a short time after the servant knocked, the double doors to the mansion creaked open slowly.